Welcome to Innovators Unscripted, the podcast for innovators by innovators. Today, Tina and I are super excited to have an amazing guest with us from our very own Chicago 24 Innovator Court, Miss Cammie Kannekens. So, Cammie, we would love it if you could take a minute to introduce yourself. And we know that innovators are notorious multitaskers. So to get things started, maybe you can give us your browser tab confession and tell us how many tabs do you have open right now? And what is the weirdest or most random one that is currently sitting on your screen?
Well, I'll introduce myself first. So I am Cammie Kannekens from Alberta, Canada. I live in Montana's right below, and then everyone's heard of the province of Saskatchewan because it's a funny word to say, and I'm not far from there. So I'm right in that corner, far away from the mountains. It's just flat and bald where I am. So I'm a district-wide instructional coach. My district is geographically vast. So I think if our school district was an American state, we'd be like the 41st largest or something like that, bigger than lots of different states. So I go to lots of schools. I spend lots of time driving, but I'm an everything coach. So I coach lots of things. But of course, technology is really where my heart is. And I was fortunate to be an innovator in Chicago in 2024 with Tina and Liz. And so that's a little bit about me.
Great. And
Oh
can you
yeah,
give
the
us your
tabs.
browser tabs? Yeah.
Okay, so when I knew that question was coming, I counted in kind of my main browser and there was like 50-ish. And then, well, that's just one window. And so then there was maybe two or three, four other windows. They probably each have a dozen, give or take. So yeah, pushing 100 in various forms, although I don't see them all the time. So I've got like different profiles going in different windows. So I have like for my podcast, there's one for that. And then I've got like the personal me and then the school me. And then the other, I teach a college course. So then I've got my college uh, browser. And yeah, so I probably am pushing 100 tabs.
Wow.
That
So your
not proud
browsers are
of
your
that,
different
but
identities.
yes, actually, that's how it works. Yes.
Well, you wear many hats, Cammie.
Well, that I do. And so keeping those profiles separate, actually, I don't know how I think from a Casey Bell video that I always point everybody to how to keep your Chrome profile separate. So important.
I agree on that. Like everybody who is with tech, like we all have a ridiculous amount of tabs open. I'm gonna assume moving forward it's not gonna be someone who has a few, but we're gonna see who has the most and who has the least. So okay, so Cammie,
Hmm.
let's hop back in our time machine back to Chicago. We were all there together as we just mentioned. So for some of the listeners in the room with us, tell us about your challenge question. What was that project you were thinking of building?
Okay, so jumping right into the project. My project was big in that it was kind of nebulous. So in 2024, AI is still new-ish, right? It's like maybe the second summer of AI. And so I think lots of our projects, in fact, our cohort was bigger than some of the others, and there was a big AI pool or focus for some of the group of us. And my project was how might we elevate or support teachers in developing countries like Africa through the use of generative AI. I had been to some countries in Africa in the summer of 2023, and that was when AI was brand new. And I had done some AI training there, and it was like they were so like some schools, some countries, some organizations have so little, right? Like the schools don't have internet, for example. Everyone, if they're going to use internet, even at some of the better off schools, teachers are hotspotting from their phone and they're sharing computers and they don't have devices. But yet some of them knew about ChatGPT. And so we did, that was really the only AI tool that was available at the time was ChatGPT. It was before anything else really had come around. And so that impact, right? They were so hopeful of what this could do because they don't have resources, they don't have textbooks, they don't have like anything that you would need a corporate organization to create or do. They just don't, corporations don't think that there's enough of a market, right? And there's just such a lack of so many things, right? So how might AI be able to produce opportunities that didn't exist or that wouldn't have traditionally existed? Could we leapfrog a whole bunch of issues by helping teachers access AI? So that was kind of my big project question, but that was like big and nebulous, and where do you even start to attack that? And so that's what I went in with.
I remember meeting you and being like, that did seem like a really big project. And I'm hoping you got out of it what you were hoping to get out of it. So when you think back to like that first day or when we were meeting, like what's a moment or a feeling or something that stands out most for you now in that whole experience?
As part like related to the project itself, do you mean, or just the innovator part,
Um,
or where are we going first?
Probably going to the academy. So going back to the academy, all of us being together in Chicago, like what's a moment or something that you remember having like that's the one thing that stood out to you from that experience.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think the people. I had the good fortune of going to the Dublin Symposium at the end of 2023, so I'd kind of experienced, like being on the Google premise and the people and a Google the food and all of that part, right? Like being in a Google environment, and so I had experienced that, and so I was a little bit prepared for what Innovator might be like. I have lots and lots of friends that have done Innovator before, so I've heard lots of stories. But I have some people that I knew going in, some friends that were doing it. Like I was fortunate to be with a few people that I had known beforehand, so that was awesome. So I was excited to meet and get to know those folks better. And then there were lots of people that I knew of, and then there was lots of people that I didn't know at all, and I got to know better. So I would say absolutely the people and just meeting the people and expanding your PLN was probably my biggest thrill or takeaway from Innovator. My project, it kind of, I'm pulling that along, and it's I've made some progress, but I didn't leave Innovator Academy saying yes. No one left Academy saying I've got it, I've nailed it, my project, we're good, right? That did not happen to most of us.
That's true.
Yeah, I think a big part of the academy that's different from those symposium events is really the design thinking part where you're guided through this process to kind of analyze your problem from all the angles,
Hmm.
and look at all the different things that can work and can't work and those design sprints. It was really hard cognitive work, and where you have such an immense problem that you, like you said, it's nebulous. It's that you keep kind of coming back to where you began and continuing from there. But the concept of being able to use AI to really, like, I love how you said leapfrog. I think
Hmm.
that's a really interesting idea where you have this community that feels so far behind, but now we have this capabilities and we've seen what it can do. And now, even in the last 2 years since then, we've seen even more what it can do to really bridge that gap and move things forward. And our cohort, even though it was back in summer of 2024, it really just wrapped up a few months ago,
Hmm.
this summer, the official academy part of it, as these projects live on. So can you talk to us a little bit about where is your project now? Where have you gone since the academy and then since the program wrapped up in the summer?
Yeah, so I left Chicago um, with lots of ideas and a way forward. We were going to have a mentor, and I ended up with a great mentor. My mentor was Georgina Dean. She lives in the UK, but she's a Canadian from before then, so we had lots to connect with. And I knew I had met Georgina before. I knew of her work, and so she was an awesome mentor, and she really helped me out a lot. So I think that mentor part of the academy afterwards is so helpful. So I'm looking at, okay, so is it about translation? Like, do I try to encourage companies to translate in languages that are remote and obscure, right? Like tribal languages, again, there's not a lot of corporate value, right? So companies want to translate the languages where there's an economic impetus to do that. And so lots of small tribal languages, or I mean, in Canada, we have dozens and dozens of small dying tribal languages as well, Indigenous languages. How do you get corporations to say, yes, it's important to help translate these? So that was, do I go down that route? And then it's like, well, getting computers and resources, like that's not the thing, right? That's a big job that I'm not equipped to do or even interested in doing, right? Like getting computers to places. And it turns out one of the things I learned really quickly, and I think I knew this before, it's not even about computers. Very few people have computers. One of the folks that I spoke with, and I will say I ended up doing a podcast kind of, is a school of 800 students and 30 teachers, and 3 or 4 teachers own a laptop. And that's what the whole school shares, right? 4 teacher laptops. So it's not about computers, but most of them have a smartphone. So I knew really quickly that whatever is going to happen, AI movement in Africa has to happen on smartphones and apps. And so then how do we convince some of the smaller ed tech companies that are educationally focused that we're coming online in 2023, 24, how do we encourage them to not just have a computer platform, a website, but also to have an app, because then they're user friendly in Africa? And then how might we encourage those companies to say, look, sure, you can charge school districts in North America a lot of money to use premium, but what would that look like if you could help African educators use your powerful products for free, the premium version, right? So, that's something that I'm still poking away at. There's a couple companies that are more apt to do that. I know I'm going to give a shout out to EduAid. They're one that's been really open to Thomas and Thomas, working with educators in Africa. Not all are, right? So my project, all of these questions, what about this? What about this? What I realized, ladies, was that people just don't get out. They don't get third world countries or less developed countries. They don't realize the extent to which life is so different there. So I've talked about the fact that computer devices are limited, but then also there's no internet, right? All of our school buildings everywhere, there's internet. Teachers in most of the places that I've talked to, if they're going to use internet, even at school, they're hotspotting on their phone on their own dime, right? And then there's electricity. So does the school even have reliable electricity, right? Or are they on blackouts? Or do they even have electricity at all of their buildings? Not always. Or there might be a light and a single plug-in. So just all sorts of things. When we think about like just the teaching infrastructure, what the buildings look like, how do kids get to school, right? Kids are walking an hour and a half back and forth to school, and then we have to figure out, well, how do we get water, right? Because some schools don't have water or access to water, so then kids are bringing a yellow jug of water in some places. And so what happened was I decided, okay, these are stories that, like, before we get to AI and how are we going to get AI to Africa, I kind of just stumbled into the place that we need to hear the stories of what school is like in Africa. And so that's not really about AI. It's not really about technology, even, although those are certainly the questions that I ask. We ask about technology as much as it feels right to ask when, there's no plumbing or reliable electricity, but yet we're talking about technology. And lots of times, most of the time, we get into that question about, well, what would AI look like, and how would that help? And so I try to bring that in if it seems appropriate. But just my project has ended up being telling the stories of schools, teachers in less developed nations. And I'm looking for not international schools, right, where there's lots of money and it's the diplomat kids and that kind of thing, but schools where students from that country attend, and just in general, not some are public schools, some are private schools, but schools where the children of that nation attend. So that's where I've ended up, adjacent to technology. And it's kind of like, it's like to talk about the technology doesn't even make sense until we have an understanding of this piece. So that's where I am.
That is definitely a very huge part of what I think is exceptionally important with what you were looking at. And so a lot of the people who were Google innovators, like they wanted to have a framework or they wanted to design something that was like a tool or something coming out. And you were just always very cognizant of what people needed in third world countries. And I think it's really important that you had mentioned that. So I think, tell us a little bit more about your project became a podcast instead
Mm-hmm.
of like a
Yeah.
tool or a framework or something. And you said storytelling was really important. So like, why was storytelling the right way to surface all of these issues?
Well, for one thing, I'm not an expert, right? I've experienced schools in some pretty remote places in some pretty remote countries. So I've been to some schools. I know some people, some teachers, and I I'm starting there, but I'm not an expert. I don't know a lot, so I want people to tell the stories of what that looks like. So my podcast is called Classrooms Beyond Borders. And I've gotten to, I try to connect with teachers in places, and that's actually been harder than I initially thought it might be, because the teachers that I want to talk to are often really remote, and there's often language issues, right? So Africa is not bad because most people speak English or French as to some extent, but in other parts of the world, English, it might be Spanish, it might be any other number of languages that are the um, initial language. And then the more remote we go, the less confident that people are with their English. And so, the English is they can speak English, but that's tough on a podcast maybe. And then there's accents. And so I had a friend that said, "Oh, I can't listen to your podcast. Those accents are just too hard." And I'm like, first world problem. But I said, okay, we have to learn about captions, right? There's this thing called captions. And actually, YouTube does a great job of captioning accents, even or things that aren't traditional English. So, Classrooms Beyond Borders, I've got several African educators, Mexico, Peru, um, some other parts of the world, and I'm still looking for more. I've got a couple that I've lined up, and then we're waiting, and so that's been hard. I've have 7 episodes so far, and I've got more in process. So my idea is that this isn't done, right? This would be something that will continue, right? That storytelling part. So
That's amazing. I mean, it's not done, but you are well on your way. And one of the things that I always admire about you, Cammie, because you didn't know me before the academy, but I knew of you. You're such like a presence in the EdTech world, and I was fangirling when I saw you walk into the academy. But one of the things that I really admire about you is your flexible thinking and how like even now you went in with this plan and this problem of practice, but then when it really adapted into something different, you just leaned in and you went right with it. So you have this ability to like see a situation and then like adapt it to your own thinking and then adapt your own thinking to be able to do something about it, which is just so inspiring. And so I'm wondering, as you're having these conversations and you're already well into this podcast series, is there something specific that you've learned from one or more of these educators that changed how you think about technology here and how we use technology?
well, just I mean, we're so blessed, right? We even in I'm in a quite rural area, so the city that I live in probably has 90,000 people, and then I serve this remote area. But even in our remotest areas, we're so blessed with the buildings that we have and the technology infrastructure and the devices and all of that. That can happen even in somewhat remote areas. So when we hear stories from around the world, I'm struck with, I guess, how well we have it. But I guess I'm also surprised, maybe dismayed is a better word, at how little the average person knows about conditions in the rest of the world, right? And that's, again, maybe that's why I was compelled to tell the stories in the podcast, because it's like so much of this, like all the other parts don't even make sense for people. They can't even understand the issue if they don't hear the stories, right? So that's collecting those stories has been really great. And then, Notebook LM comes out and you can feed those YouTube videos, or so the podcast, I've got it on Spotify and YouTube. You feed those YouTube links into Notebook, and then you have this searchable database, right? The data crunching that we can do is something that's like spectacular. And I think when we think about where we were at with AI in 2024 at Academy or Innovator Academy, AI wasn't even necessarily that powerful yet. And Notebook, I think it might have been conceptualized, but it certainly wasn't available. And so using Notebook LM and at ISTE last year, and I believe were you both at ISTE? Tina was, were you, Liz? At
Yes.
ISTE, yes. So, being at ISTE last year, that was part of when I was showcasing my project, is using Notebook LM then to be able to analyze and to compare, right? Like, how do these nations compare? Or, what teacher salary, or all those kinds of things. So to be able to take the data, the stories, and then, compress them into comparative data is powerful too. So I'm not sure if I answered. I can't remember what the question was, so I don't know if I answered it, but
That was
I went on the
that was brilliant.
Notebook LM tangent there.
Well, okay, so that's one of the things I love about you, Cammie, is you were saying that you're surprised by what discrepancies there are and things that you're like, it's just so surprising to see that, like, where we are and what we have even in the most rural places, you had said. So I'm trying to wonder, you said you coach a little bit of everything, right? And so you're
Mm-hmm.
always coaching people within your district, and then you are one of the head, Liz had mentioned, we both fangirl after you all the time, and I got to hang out with you at ISTE, and like everybody knows you and everybody knows what you're doing, and you are so high level with EdTech sources, but you're very cognizant of what's happening all around the world. So I guess my question is, thinking about AI or Notebook LM, or where we are with things, like, how has this experience of you learning these stories and talking to people changed the way you frame AI with the teachers you were coaching every day, or framing the educational technology aspect of talking to your teachers in your district? Like, do you mention to them like that information? Does it change how you coach them? Like, how does that impact you?
Yeah, that's, it's interesting. I guess I kind of have two worlds. I share my podcast with anyone who will listen, but that's actually been one of the challenges. I don't know if we're talking about challenges, but I'm going to talk about a challenge. Is that, like, I think the stories are important, and I think that, but people in North America, in the Western world, we are quick to just not even realize that other places exist. And so, even with my podcast, I thought it would probably be something that was interesting, that people wouldn't mind hearing about, what it's like for a teacher or to live in remote places of the world. But it turns out that people aren't even interested, right? Well, why would I want to listen to that, right? So I've been, even in my own, my friends will listen, right? Kind of. But even teachers or people in my school district, it's like, oh yeah, you got a podcast about places in the world. Huh. And even, even within our own Chicago cohort or the innovator community, I know I have a few friends, people who've really been interested in my project, and often people who are connected with places around the world and who've been to places and understand the disparity. But even, people in our EdTech community, it's like, yeah, well, that I don't care about that. So I don't know how to get people interested in hearing the stories of places around the world. So that's been a challenge that I was bigger than I thought. I thought people would be interested, more interested in these stories, and it's mediocre.
I can see how that is a challenge and where that frustration would come from. But I mean, from our perspective too, we just see you taking all of those right steps and making all of those right choices no matter how small they feel on your side, I mean, the impact of being able to share these voices and these stories with any community. And I mean, just having it be available for people to access, you don't know when someone might find it for the first time and listen to those stories. And I mean, what a great tool, not only for EdTech leaders, not only for educators and teachers and administrators, but also just for students to hear these experiences of what other students are living. And you, Cammie, you have this amazing, so you're not only a Google Innovator, but you're a part of this ISTE leadership community. And so you have this stage and this platform. So for you to still be feeling that frustration and the worry, and like, this is important, and now we just need to share that story. The fact that you have already all of these episodes lined up makes for a great binge, especially if you're in the Northeast in this blizzard right now. It would be great to go in, and we'll have your podcast linked in the episode description. But I just listening to these stories, it's so inspirational, and you're doing all of the right things and talking to all the right people. So I just want to commend you for doing that.
Well, thanks, Liz. And I think that's part, right? Sometimes you just have to say, okay, this is important. Even if people aren't listening right now, or there's not a big, lineup to listen to stories about people who are teaching with literally stick walls and metal roofs and no electricity. That's okay. The stories are important, and I can honor educators all over the world by telling those stories and giving those stories a voice in a way that they might never have had. And you're right, Liz. It could be just the right person that hears the story, and maybe the stories are for later. Maybe I mean, I'm capturing them, and they're going to live on as a record, right? They won't expire. And maybe we can look back at them in 10 years and say, oh, wow, we've made a great change, and look at where we were and how much technology has changed, or how much the world has changed, or not. But it's a record of a starting place. And I guess that's the part, as innovators in general, is we just have to remember that you have to, just because it doesn't feel like you're making progress, or it doesn't feel like you're accomplishing much. And maybe this is like the real big innovator piece. And I don't know the extent to which you found this with your projects, but it's just like you just have to take a step, and you just have to do a thing and start. And that's when I ended up on the podcast. Like, well, this is I think this is the thing. This is a thing that I can do now. This is a step that I can take. This is for now, this is the thing. This is the way that I can try to add to the story, or make a story. So yes, with the ISTE side, I'm also part of a group of ISTE community leaders who do a global impact conference. And we will have our third virtual global impact conference coming up at April this year. And even then, this year, our theme is storytelling, right? So that, hopefully we can wind that in a little bit as well. But the stories of around the world, they're important. And at some point, people might be interested in listening, and people have to be in a spot where that matters to them too. And sometimes it might, and sometimes it might not.
So moving forward, you have a podcast. We've all heard it
Yes.
from you today. Go out there and check it out. Aspiring Innovators, Alumni Innovators. The other thing is, tell us where to find you, Cammie. Like, tell us about, like, you are an ISTE leader, community leader. Some things are going up. Tell us what's coming up that we can keep following you with.
So you should register for the Global Impact Virtual Conference. It's in April. I post about it lots on LinkedIn. That's probably where I do most of my posting right now, is on LinkedIn. I think we have a pretty vibrant Chicago 24 community there of innovators and other innovators from the Chicago, or from the 24, friends from Amsterdam, and from the virtual 24 group. So I think there's lots of us out there. So register for the Global Impact ISTE Community Leaders 12-hour virtual conference coming up, and hear lots of stories from around the world. I'm Mrs. Kannekens or Cammie Kannekens. I have a pretty unique name. I think I'm the only one in the world, actually. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I post a bit on Facebook and a bit on Instagram, but probably LinkedIn mostly is where we do that. I also have just started or co-started GEG Instructional Coaches, and with Jeff Bradbury. And that happened in October. It happened really fast, but that is an excellent global group. Usually when we meet, we have like 8 or 10 different nations represented. And so that's a place where we get together. We kind of are in a spot where we're having like a casual midday EST time chat about coaching issues, and then an evening Eastern Standard Time session where we look at tips or tools. This week is coming up Google Forms and Gemini. We've talked about Google Vids and, of course, Gemini and Notebook and all sorts of things. We're going to do a Google Classroom episode in a bit. So any kind of a coach can join us. And we don't always record just because it's pretty conversational. Sometimes we do. So you can join in person and look for GEG Instructional Coaches. That would be another great place to make us some connections with some great people.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cammie. And I can speak as a member of that community. Again, great appreciation for that awesome group of coaches from everywhere. Thank you so much for coming on today, for sharing your journey and your spark. For our listeners, if there's something in this episode that ignited an idea for you or something you connect with, please let us know in the comments, and please check out those links to Cammie's amazing podcast resources and sign up for everything she has going on. I will be there with bells on, Cammie. You inspire me every day, every time I meet you.
I'm just going to give a shout there. I'm going to say it's Classrooms Beyond Borders, and you can find it on YouTube and Spotify and really anywhere podcasts are. It's on lots of places. So give it a listen. And like Tina and Liz's podcast, if you like episodes and you repost them, retweet them, that actually really helps other people see them as well. So whether it's their podcast or my podcast, give it a like. That does actually help it out. So yeah, ladies, it's been lovely.
Cammie, yes, thank you, and you are absolutely awe-inspiring. So glad you came on with us, our fellow Chicago 2024 person. So will anybody who is out there remember to keep innovating. If you are an Innovator now, an Innovator alumni, you're an aspiring innovator, go ahead and sign up and hop on this podcast. Hopefully it wasn't too stressful. So come on over, and we would love to hear everybody's stories.